January 2026, Washington is frozen over and suddenly the Justice Department drops what everybody's been calling the Epstein Files. People hear that and think one big folder, but it's really a stack of different archives that finally got pulled together.
Before we go deeper, just a quick note for listeners. This episode will mention sexual abuse and trafficking. We are not going into graphic detail, but if that's difficult or triggering, please take care of yourself and step away if you need to.
All right. When we say Epstein Files, we're talking about three main buckets. One, FBI and DOJ case files going back to the early 2000s. Interview transcripts, surveillance reports, search warrants, internal memos. 2, material seized from Epstein himself, his addresses, flight records, emails, photos, financial records. 3, documents from civil lawsuits and the Epstein estate, depositions, settlements, victim impact statements.
So basically, Sentinel, it's like when you run a big Intel fusion cell. Different agencies, different sources, finally stitched together instead of hiding in some dusty filing cabinet. Abi?
Exactly. And the reason it's finally stitched together is the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Congress passed that in 2025 after years of stonewalling. It forces the executive branch, justice, FBI, state, to review and release Epstein-related records with narrowly defined redactions for ongoing cases, genuine national security, and clear victim privacy.
And that fight on the Hill was no joke. You had red team, blue team both dragging feet, because this thing cut across party lines. Some folks wanted a clean burn down of the network. Others wanted to slow roll to protect their own 06s and above in the political world, if you know what I mean.
And survivors' lawyers were pushing from the other side. For years, victims saw sealed agreements, sealed depositions, powerful names hidden behind John Doe. The Transparency Act happened because they refused to let this quietly fade after Epstein died in custody and Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted.
Let's anchor the basics the files actually confirm. Epstein was a convicted sex offender. He pled to state charges in Florida in 2008 after federal prosecutors cut him a notorious non-prosecution agreement that shut down a broader federal case. The files show that deal was negotiated in secret with input from his legal team and sign-off by senior DOJ officials, while victims were kept in the dark.
That's the part that still blows my mind. You tell the victims nothing. You let the rich man stroll in and out of a jail with his own driver, and you call that justice? If a broke kid from my old neighborhood tried that, he'd catch 20 years, no plea, no mercy.
The files also lock in the structure of his trafficking operation. Multiple jurisdictions, recruiters targeting vulnerable young girls, movement between properties in New York, Florida, New Mexico, the Virgin Islands. Maxwell's role as his close associate and co-conspirator is detailed in witness statements, travel records, and her own federal conviction for sex trafficking and related offenses.
And there are others in that inner circle space, staff, pilots, assistants, some named as co-conspirators, some granted immunity in earlier deals, some never charged. The files don't magically give us a clean list of every abuser. What they show, again and again, is how many people saw enough to know something was very wrong and still kept the machine running.
Yeah, pattern of life is clear. Repeated flights, same locations, same young girls, powerful guests cycling through. Even if not every name equals a crime, the operational picture is ugly. And the long trail of impunity in U.S. courts, that's command failure at every level of the justice system.
When you zoom out on these files, what you really see is Epstein's ecosystem. Contact books packed with politicians, royals, billionaires, academics. Flight logs showing who flew on his planes, when, and roughly where. Emails and calendar entries sketching out dinners, conferences, private meetings.
And photos everywhere. Smiling at galas, charity events, scientific conferences. If you just looked at the pictures, you'd think, this guy is like a professional +1 for the global elite.
This is where we need a sharp line between mere association and evidence of facilitation or abuse. Being in a contact book, being at the same fundraiser, or even one flight on his plane does not automatically mean criminal conduct. The files list a lot of names in that category, public figures from both U.S. parties and from Europe, the Middle East, Latin America, who have denied any wrongdoing and have never been charged.
But then there are cases where proximity raised enough red flags that institutions had to respond. The most obvious is Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The files reinforce what journalists had already uncovered: multiple visits, overnight stays, travel with Epstein even after his 2008 conviction. He's denied the specific abuse allegations and settled one civil case without admitting liability, but the fallout cost him his public roles and military titles.
You also see references in the records to European political figures like Peter Mandelson and former Council of Europe's Secretary-General Thorbjørn Jagland. In their cases, what the files show is contact, meetings, social encounters, occasionally travel in similar circles. They've denied any involvement in or knowledge of abuse, and they haven't been charged with Epstein-related crimes. The key point, contact on its own is not proof of criminal conduct.
Right. But if you're looking at this like an intel analyst, repeated contact after the guy's already a registered sex offender? That's at least a big fat Y in the logbook. You don't court-martial on vibes, but you also don't ignore the pattern.
From a human rights angle, this is a textbook case of how structural power protects predators. Epstein leveraged philanthropy, science patron status, and access to presidents and royals to look untouchable. Young girls, often from poor backgrounds, saw this wall of power and money and felt like no one would believe them. And too often, they were right. Police, prosecutors, even diplomats brushed them off.
And the diplomatic side is key, Olga. You've got people with state security details, diplomatic passports, sovereign immunity. If a teenage girl on some island says, "This powerful guest harmed me," who does she even report to? The local cop? The embassy that's hosting the man?
The files hint at that protection. You see U.S. officials worrying about sensitive diplomatic implications if they push too hard. You see notes about high-level contacts expressing concern. None of that proves a specific cover-up by a specific person, but structurally, it's obvious. When predators are plugged into elite networks, every lever of delay and doubt tilts in their favor.
And the survivors are left isolated. The global glamour, presidents, royals, Nobel-adjacent academics, becomes part of the weapon. If you speak out, you're not just accusing a man, you're accusing a whole world that can hire armies of lawyers and PR people. That is why these files matter. They expose not only individuals, but the culture that told victims, "You are small, he is big, be quiet."
When DOJ finally started posting the Epstein files under the Transparency Act, the rollout was a mess. First wave, pages blacked out wherever a powerful alleged perpetrator might be identified, while a lot of victim information was left readable or easy to piece together. It looked like protect the elite, expose the vulnerable.
Total comms failure. You open a PDF and see black bars over VIP names, but a survivor's age, hometown, and story basically intact. That's how you get people saying, "This is not a disclosure, it's a shield for the brass." And they weren't wrong to be angry.
Survivors felt betrayed again. Many had already testified, already faced cross-examination. Then the state turns around and uses privacy to hide the people they named, while forgetting to protect them. Human rights groups hammered DOJ, saying this was exactly how institutions reproduce impunity.
To be fair on the technical side, some of it was bureaucratic chaos, different redaction standards, rushed deadlines, lawyers terrified of misidentifying someone. But the effect was political. It fed the narrative that the government will bend over backwards to avoid embarrassing the powerful and treat victims as collateral damage.
And then you had the White House trying to ride both horses. Early on, Trump goes out there promising full transparency, teasing a so-called client list, hinting that it'll blow up his enemies. When the files don't deliver that Hollywood moment, no single list, lots of nuance, suddenly it's, well, the deep state is hiding things, and Congress tied our hands.
Yeah, the narrative kept shifting. First, we'll open everything. Then, as it became clear some names would be uncomfortable across the spectrum, we saw delays, procedural excuses, and a lot of finger-pointing at career officials. Meanwhile, bipartisan groups in Congress, especially those who wrote the Transparency Act, started threatening subpoenas and funding cuts if DOJ didn't fix the redaction standards and prioritize victim protection.
Classic CYA operation. Everybody swears they want the truth, as long as it mostly implicates the other guy's roster. But the logs and memos don't care about party affiliation. They show how money and status buy options normal people never get. Plea deals, soft-touch supervision, ongoing review instead of handcuffs.
So what would real accountability look like now? For me, it's 3 layers. 1. Reopen cases where there is solid evidence against alleged facilitators and abusers, regardless of their passport or party. 2. Independent inquiries, truly independent, into why prosecutors, regulators, and institutions failed for so long. Names, timelines, recommendations. And 3. Reparations and long-term support for survivors, funded partly by the fortunes that grew from this network.
I'd add a 4th, structural change. Tighten rules on non-prosecution agreements, especially ones done in secret. Limit how much diplomatic or institutional status can block basic investigations in trafficking cases. And build automatic outside review when a powerful suspect gets sweetheart treatment. Don't let the same small circle investigate its own failures behind closed doors.
Because that's the pattern, innit? Different scandal, same movie. A few resignations, 1 or 2 people do time. Then everybody says, we've learned lessons, while the machine keeps humming. If the system can't genuinely police its own elite, ordinary folks stop believing in the rule of law.
And when people stop believing, they start looking for vigilante answers or wild conspiracy briefings on the internet. That's dangerous terrain. We need hard evidence, real prosecutions, not fantasy war stories. Otherwise, we're just swapping one kind of abuse of power for another.
Survivors have carried this for decades. They deserve more than symbolism. They deserve states and institutions willing to be embarrassed, to be sued, to be exposed, if that's what it takes to stop the next Epstein before he builds another private island empire on stolen childhoods.
We're going to keep tracking what actually comes out of these files. New cases, reforms, and yes, the gaps that stay conveniently unexplored. Chakuka, Olga, Duke, thanks for digging into this with me today.
Always, my brother. Heavy topic, but necessary. We'll keep breaking it down so folks aren't left with just rumors and rage.
Copy that. Stay frosty out there, people. Ask hard questions, but keep it grounded in facts.
Take care of yourselves, believe survivors, and we'll talk to you next time.